Artificial intelligence is moving rapidly into and across the business landscape, but many are struggling with what is real and what is hype. My guest today, Dave Sutton, managing partner at Blue Rhino Capital, is here to help us better understand the tools we now have access to and how we can leverage them on a daily basis. Dave, thanks for taking the time to join me.
Hey, Jenna, great to see you. I'm happy to talk about AI today. This is going to be fantastic.
This is, I mean, everyone's talking about AI, so I had to get you on because there's so many questions out there. And we're also having you because ahead of your November keynote for our speaker series at Millersdale in our headquarters in Atlanta, we're going to tease your talk a little bit. We're not going to give away too much of it, but we're going to get into some of it. So during our brainstorm session, you mentioned that the release of AI kind of reminds you of when the internet launched.
Yeah, it jogs a lot of memories, right? I mean, it's strange how history sometimes repeats itself, especially with transformational technologies. I mean, let's start with the fact that the internet and AI have one thing in common, which is they are transformational. They are dramatically changing business and society. You can look at the internet and what we went through, in the late 90s, early 2000s was really focused on, different ways of sharing information and communicating. And now with AI, we're transforming around process automation and how we make decisions. And both of them, have another thing in common, which is rapid adoption. And as you mentioned in your opening comment, a lot of hype. And I would also go further and say a lot of mythology, that's kind of emerging around both of them. And again, thinking back to the internet, we had a lot of fear, at that time. I remember for retailers, everybody was talking about how bricks and mortar was dead and everything was going to go .com. Fast forward just a couple of years, .com started dropping like flies. Everybody remembers Pets.com and eToys and Boo.com and all these companies that had massive valuations. But, when you peeled it all back, they really weren't necessarily real businesses. They were e-commerce light, a front end with no back end, no logistics, no support. And I'm seeing a lot of the same things today, Jenna, as it relates to AI. A lot of promises, a lot of hype, a lot of crazy valuations, a lot of fear, about people losing their jobs or businesses going away. And again, I'm here to kind of, for the audience today, just to say, I think we're going to see a lot of parallels of what happened with the internet, which is kind of eventually things will normalize. A lot of the myths will be debunked. Well, the fear and the greed will come down a little bit. But not to be, Pollyanna-ish about this. I mean, there are going to be winners and losers, just like there were in the internet. I mean, there were Main Street businesses, retailers that went out of business because of Amazon, right? So we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that this is transformational, and there ultimately will be winners and losers. So I'm looking forward today to sharing more about that, and obviously with our talk in a couple of weeks, going a little bit deeper on who I think the winners and losers may be.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head right there at the end for me, because that's where I was going next. From a corporate perspective, this is a new disruptive technology, like you mentioned. But we know that it's never black and white when it comes to things like that, as you just talked us through. But we shouldn't be scared of it. But we also, if we don't pay attention to it, it will overtake you as a consequence, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we shouldn't minimize this, right? I mean, AI is a game changer, no doubt. And it is transforming businesses. It already has started. It's already started transforming the way people do business, the way that they think about connecting with their customers. It's changing our society and the way we think about some of the ethical complications and implications associated with AI. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we can't kind of rest in a place of fear or complacency. And the question that business executives and retail need to be asking themselves is, how do we want to respond? Do we embrace this? Turn on the intellectual curiosity and really try to understand how we can adapt and adopt technologies in our business, or do we hide and duck and cover and kind of hope that it blows past us? I'm talking to a lot of my customers right now about, what are sources of innovation? What are ways that we can not necessarily reinvent our businesses or retrench, right? But really think about ways to innovate and maybe take a little bit more of a proactive approach. One of the things I saw in the internet era was a lot of people thought that this was going to be about literally business models being destroyed. And if you think back to it, the real winners during the internet era were not so much, this big box versus that e-commerce model. It was customer experience. Customer experience came to the forefront, and people, won based on having the better customer experience. Apple didn't just go into an e-commerce hibernation. Apple got into retail, right? Walmart didn't kind of retrench into their big boxes. They got into the .com world and then ultimately integrated their online and offline worlds for a better customer experience. And I think the same thing is going to play out in AI. I think there are going to be massive opportunities for productivity gains, as well as massive opportunities for innovation. And the question you need to ask yourself is, how do we want to get in the game? It's not about ignoring the game or not playing the game. It's about playing the game in the context of where our business needs to be, 5, 10, 15 years from now. People keep in mind, the internet, it's taken really 20 years to kind of play through and to see true winners and losers. I think AI is going to be a little faster, Jenna, and you and I talked about this. We can't wait around 20 years. But it's going to be slower than I think people are talking about, right? The technology will advance, but how it actually impacts business and society will lag. The question is, how far or how long can you wait? I'm advocating for being on the front edge of the wave, not being in the trough, which was not where you want to be as it relates to technology innovation.
Yeah, definitely not. That leads to bad outcomes.
Yeah.
The question then is, how can departments use AI to transform the way they do their jobs and connect with their customers? We've seen companies dabbling a little bit, whether that's on the customer service side or, the creative departments. You hit on it a little bit. People are worried about losing their jobs, but it's really, I like what you said. It's a balancing act of figuring out innovation and strategy and how you really leverage this new technology to your benefit.
Right. And we're gonna go into this. Is a great lead into what we're going to talk about in our session in a couple of weeks. I've given a lot of thought, from looking at this from the perspective of a retailer, whether you're an e-commerce online retailer, a bricks and mortar retailer today, or a hybrid, which most people actually, quite frankly, I would argue are a hybrid retailer today. And I've kind of come up in my own mind, there's a couple different ways to come at this. If you want to embrace AI, there's at least 5, and there's probably more, but 5 that I've come up with ways that this is going to impact shopping experiences kind of specifically and more broadly retail business models, right? So we'll go more, and I'm going to name them here, but we'll go into each one of them in a lot more detail in a couple of weeks. But, conversational commerce, which is, getting a lot of press right now as it relates to, on one end of the spectrum, it's robots are going to be sales associates, right? It's kind of one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is we're going to be better at kind of translating text and think about just like a script, how you would serve a customer, translating that into some kind of a speech-based solution, and enabling conversational commerce. And how that shows up, it could be, an avatar, it could be a virtual chatbot, it could be a robot, right? But there's something there around conversational commerce, which is about productivity gains and maybe even a better customer experience, right? So that's one. Emotional relevance, I think, is going to be more important than ever. So nobody wants to buy from a robot, but they do want to buy from someone who understands and can tap into what I care about, my feelings at that moment of truth. So I think that's going to be an area of exploration. And there's already been a lot of work done in this, and even simple things like speaking to me in my language. There's a ton of work that's been done to really kind of, codify being able to take, English, shopping experiences and turn them into German shopping experiences, but not just word for word, culturally. How do we want to actually be consistent with what the shopper wants? Value reciprocity is another big area where, hey, I now have visibility to what you paid for that product, and I know you're gouging me. All right. So how do we find pricing optimization solutions that are market aligned, but also business goal oriented, so we can make margins that we need to be profitable as a retailer? Predictive connectivity is another one we're going to go deep on, which is really looking at how can I do a better job of targeting people with messages using AI to buy media at the right price at the right time to get my message in front of the right people. Humans have done this for decades, right? But it's now a possibility we can use AI to make better connections on our behalf. And that's a great way, I think, to think about how AI can be a kind of a co-pilot with a media buyer. And then finally, I think, and this is kind of the golden lining, I think, of a lot of this, really having authentic social impact. And there's some really interesting tools that coming out that are AI enabled to really help think about, like, at the point of sale, how inauthentic it is when you're at the grocery store to get kind of a prompt to give money to, some local charity. What if it was actually enabled by what you care about as a consumer, and you're getting prompted to give back at the moment of truth in something that is meaningful to you, not just something that's meaningful to that store or to some lobbyist someplace that's actually trying to drive charitable donations using retail experiences as a way to get to that audience. So I think those 5 things are really where we as retailers need to think about embracing AI. And obviously we'll unpack that and go into more detail when we're in our session in a couple weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all looking forward to that one. I'll include a link to register, of course, for everyone who's interested in joining and listening in.